You've been told your mood is a reaction. Something happens, then you feel something about it. Neville Goddard says you have that backwards. The mood comes first. It's not the reaction, it's the cause. And once you see how, you'll also see exactly why it usually doesn't work for you. Most advice about this tells you to think differently. Think positive. Reframe the thought. Goddard says you're aiming at the wrong target entirely. So here's what we're doing today. First, the claim itself, in Goddard's own case histories, because one of them is honestly hard to believe. Then the part that actually matters, why this fails for most people, and the specific discipline he named for holding on through the part where it feels like it isn't working. And I want to walk through this the way Goddard actually built it, not the flattened internet version. Because the internet version, think happy thoughts and wait, isn't what he taught, and it's not why the people in his case histories got results that lasted. Here's why the distinction matters. If this is just think happy thoughts, it's decoration, and you've heard it 1,000 times already. But if Goddard is making a real causal claim, that your felt mood generates the conditions of your life rather than the other way around, then failing to understand it has a cost. You keep managing your mood around your circumstances instead of using it on them. Say that plainly. You're not being told to wait for good news so you can finally feel good. You're being told the order runs the other way. Feel the mood first. The circumstance is what shows up, because the mood was already there. And most people never even test the claim, because the popular version of manifestation asks you to fake a feeling you don't have. That's not what Goddard is describing. It's harder than that, and it's more specific than that. So let's get it exactly right. By the end of this, you'll know Goddard's actual claim, his own case histories for it, the named reason he says it fails, and how two completely different teachers, a neuroscientist and a channeled entity, describe the identical failure point in their own languages. That convergence is the real evidence here. Ordinary psychology runs one direction. Something happens, and then you have a feeling about it. Circumstance, then mood. Goddard flips the arrow completely. Mood first, circumstance follows. In his own words, from the law and the promise. The drama of life is an imaginal activity in which we bring to pass by our moods, rather than by our physical acts. He's explicit that this isn't metaphor. Elsewhere, he writes it as mechanism. We believe we're happy because we got the thing. Goddard says it runs backward. You get the thing because you first assumed the feeling of already having it. His own image for it. The mood of the wish fulfilled is the high tide which lifts us easily off the bar of the senses, where we usually lie stranded. And notice he's specific about mood, not thought. You can think a positive thought without feeling anything. Goddard says that thought does nothing on its own. It has to be felt, carried as an emotional state, or it stays exactly what it looks like. Words. When a mood is sustained long enough to become a constant mood, a habitual attitude, it defines your character and results in a true transformation. Not one strong feeling, a sustained one. Here's the case history that makes this concrete. Goddard tells it about a woman he calls TK, 55 years old, unemployed, broke, facing homelessness. She needed a car, rent money, clothes, a job, and trying to picture every single one exhausted her. So on Goddard's advice, she stopped trying to picture the specifics. For 2 months, every night as she fell asleep, she held on to one feeling and repeated one phrase. Isn't it wonderful? Something marvelous is happening to me now. Not the car, not the job, just that feeling, held every night, on the edge of sleep. Here's what happened. A casual acquaintance ran into an old friend of hers from 25 years earlier. That friend had become wealthy, and for reasons Goddard says she never fully learned, he decided to share it. A car, an apartment, a monthly income, eventually made legally hers for the rest of her life. 2 months. One feeling, held nightly, not once. That detail matters more than the outcome, and we're coming back to exactly why. It's tempting to file TK's story away as one lucky exception. So Goddard gives a second case, deliberately smaller, because the pattern is the point, not the size of the result. A woman's daughter needed $3,000. Urgently. Instead of strategizing how to get it, mother and daughter did one thing. They sat together and held the mood of joy, as if the need were already met. Within days, the daughter's 91-year-old grandmother, entirely unprompted, decided to distribute her savings while she was still alive to see it matter. She gave the daughter exactly $3,000. Not roughly, exactly. Now here's the part most videos about this skip entirely, because it's less exciting than the outcome. Goddard is very specific about why this fails, and it's not vague. He names the exact mechanics. In his own words, from the power of awareness, your assumption places you psychologically where you are not physically, and then, the second half of the sentence is the whole failure mechanism. Then your senses pull you back from where you were psychologically to where you are physically. Your assumed feeling puts you somewhere new. Your eyes, your bank balance, your empty inbox pull you right back to where you started. Goddard has a word for the discipline of resisting that pull. Importunity. From the biblical parable of the man who wakes his friend at midnight demanding bread, and gets it. The text says, because of his importunity. Shameless, brazen, persistence. Persistence in maintaining the consciousness of the desire already being fulfilled results in its fulfillment. Not a single act. A maintained attitude. Goddard names a second, quieter way people lose the state, and I think this one is the more common failure. He calls it being double-minded. You look in the mirror at your current reality, and in that single glance, you forget the person you just assumed yourself to be. It isn't dramatic doubt that breaks the state. It's this small, almost invisible slip, glancing at what's actually in front of you, and quietly accepting it as the whole truth again. There's one more piece here, and it explains why TK took 2 months while other results in Goddard's case histories happen almost overnight. He ties the speed of manifestation directly to how natural the feeling is, not to how long you've been trying. Acting at high tension, an imaginal act is an immediate objective fact. Keyed low, an imaginal act is realized in a time process. A weak, half-believed feeling takes months, if it works at all. A fully natural one can be nearly instant. His example for what natural actually feels like is a child playing pretend. Goddard tells of a mother who healed her son's warts by simply buying them from him for a few coins, telling him plainly, "They're mine now. You can't keep what belongs to someone else." The boy thought it was a game. Within 10 days, the warts were fading. Within a month, everyone was gone. And here's why most people never get TK's result. They assume the feeling for a day, maybe 3. Their senses report 0 change. So they conclude it isn't working, and they let go, right at the point where Goddard says the whole mechanism depends on not letting go. Now, if this were only one mystic's claim, you'd be right to be skeptical. So here's the same failure point, described by someone working in a completely different field, with a completely different vocabulary. Neuroscientist Joe Dispenza. Dispenza's language is neurochemical, not scriptural. Thought is what he calls the electrical charge. Elevated emotion, gratitude, joy, is the magnetic charge. Together they create what he calls a new electromagnetic signature. And his explanation for why people can't hold an elevated state is almost identical to Goddard's, just told through biochemistry instead of scripture. He says the body becomes chemically addicted to old emotions, adrenaline, cortisol, and the moment you try to feel differently, it throws what he calls the kitchen sink at you. Anger, worry, impatience, a withdrawal reaction, demanding its usual chemical fix. Dispenza calls the underlying engine the thinking-feeling loop. A thought triggers a feeling. That feeling primes the brain to generate more thoughts equal to it. Repeat that daily, and the feeling becomes a mood. The mood becomes what you'd call your personality. The loop feeds itself. His phrase for the end state is stark. The body becomes the mind. Not a metaphor for him either. A chemically conditioned pattern running on autopilot, defending its own continuation. By your mid-30s, Dispenza says, 95% of who you are is a memorized set of automatic thoughts and reflexive emotional reactions. That's Dispenza's version of the senses pull you back. He just calls it biology instead of psychology. And unlike Goddard's case histories, Dispenza points to measured data for the part that's testable, the body's response to a sustained elevated state, not the outcome in the world. In a 117-person study he cites, 10 minutes of practiced elevated emotion, 3 times a day, for 4 days, raised immunoglobulin A, an antibody your immune system depends on, by an average of 49.5%. A separate study he cites found 4 days of meditation measurably changed the expression of 8 genes tied to tumor suppression and cell repair. Whatever you think of the larger manifestation claim, the body-level claim, sustained emotional state changes measurable biology, is not fringe. One more voice, and I want to be honest about a real difference here, not pretend everyone agrees perfectly. Abraham-Hicks talk about emotion constantly, but their claim is subtly different from Goddard's. In their own words, your emotions do not create, but they do indicate what you are currently attracting. For them, the true cause is vibration. Emotion is the readout, the dashboard gauge, not the engine. It's a real distinction, not a rounding error. But notice where it lands you practically. You still can't shift the gauge without changing what's under the hood, and the only access you have to what's under the hood is how you feel right now. 3 different metaphysics. The same lever, in your hand, today. And Hicks's framework hands you something Goddard and Dispenza don't. A map. They call it the Emotional Guidance Scale. 22 levels, from the highest alignment down to the deepest resistance. Joy sits at the top. Fear, grief, and despair sit at the bottom. And here's the part almost nobody mentions when they cite this scale. You are never asked to leap from the bottom to the top. The scale works like a GPS. The navigational system never asks, "Where have you been?" Its only mission is to assist you in getting from where you are to where you want to be. One rung up, not the summit. This actually solves a real problem with TK's story. Leaping straight to, "Isn't it wonderful?" from genuine despair usually just fails, because it feels fake. Hicks's term for the real move is reaching for relief, not reaching for joy. Depression up to anger still counts. Anger up to hopefulness still counts. Each step just has to feel, in their words, like the next logical step, not a performance. Before we close, I need to say clearly what none of this means. It does not mean force a smile over a real problem. It does not mean if you feel bad, you're doing it wrong, so hide the bad feeling. Negative emotion is not the enemy here. It's information. Something in you is pointing at something real, and it deserves to be looked at, not buried under a forced good mood. Here's a detail from that same emotional guidance scale that makes the point concretely. Moving from depression up to anger counts as progress on that scale, even though anger doesn't feel good. It's one rung closer to alignment. Getting angry about something you've been depressed about isn't a step backward. So this video was never permission to skip past what you actually feel. It's the opposite. What to do with the feeling you'd rather avoid, instead of overriding it with a mood you don't have. That's its own video, and it's the very next one on this channel. TK held one feeling for 2 months before anything changed on the outside. Most people who try this and say it doesn't work held it for 2 days. The gap between assuming and materializing isn't proof you're doing it wrong. It's the whole game. Goddard, Dispenza, and Hicks never met, and never agreed on why any of this works. What they agreed on, without knowing it, is exactly where people quit. Not at the start, not at the end. Right in the middle, at the precise moment the feeling stops being confirmed by what they can see. Most people who fail at this didn't fail. They quit 1 week before their mood would have hardened into fact. So here's what I actually want to know. What feeling are you avoiding holding on to because your senses haven't confirmed it yet? Tell me in the comments. And if you want the other half of this, what to do with the feeling this video told you not to suppress, that video's up next. Thanks for watching. Let us know in the comments what you'd like us to cover next. And check out our website, thedeepsynthesis.com, where we go deeper on every topic, plus a free convergence map waiting for you.